My wife wanted to feel younger. She wanted to experience new sensations because she was no longer interested in me. But she did not expect that all her fantasies would collapse into a cruel reality, and that very bad consequences would await her. Karma in action. She walked out the door. I knew it was inevitable. It had been building up for a while. I had noticed the signs for months. She had grown distant, then irritable, then indifferent, and finally confrontational. No matter what I said or did, nothing improved the situation. In those months, there were very few good times. In fact, the only good times we had were when we were out with friends, which served as a distraction from our miserable life. My name is Kurt Randolph, and she is my wife, Sue. Well, she's still my wife, but not for much longer. I have already spoken to a divorce attorney to draw up the papers. 26 years of marriage ending, not with a bang, but with a whimper. I will be calling my son and daughters to inform them sometime this weekend. I just don't know where we went wrong. 26 years of marriage, all but the last few were good. Not great, but good. Life wasn't perfect, but we had a decent life. Our kids, Glenn, Julia, and Rachel, are all healthy, well-adjusted young adults. 2 are still in college and 1 graduated 6 months ago. Maybe that was the catalyst for our problems. The empty nest syndrome started when our first child went off to college. It affected her more than I realized. She changed drastically. Although our bed life was never exciting, we enjoyed each other, until about 3 years ago. Since then, no matter how much I hinted, made advances, or begged, it didn't happen. It was the change, and I had to deal with it. The fact that intimacy was no longer a part of our life together. Needless to say, this led to many heated arguments. I eventually gave up and handled the situation on my own. It wasn't worth the fights. Why would I want to be intimate with someone who didn't want me? A few months ago, she began to change, and it wasn't for the better. Now she's leaving, and to be honest, I'm struggling to feel anything resembling sorrow. I know where she's going, to her lover. She wouldn't bother to get intimate with me, but she spends hours in bed with some guy 10 years younger than her. When I first noticed this recent change, I knew something was up. I cared, just not as much as I probably should have. I had to know, though, so I asked around. I work 50-60 hours a week at 3M Corporation in Aberdeen, South Dakota, as a process engineer. It's a great job, except that occasionally I have to work at odd hours. Sometimes I'm on call, and if something goes wrong that the maintenance techs can't fix, it's up to me to get things running again. Being on call has caused a few problems in the past, missing weekend trips, kids' Saturday soccer games, or even an occasional evening meal. The pay is good, though, and despite Aberdeen being the 3rd largest city in South Dakota, it still feels like a small town. I much prefer that to big city life, which we experienced for a few years in St. Paul, Minnesota. In this city, not much happens without someone finding out. If you ask around, someone always knows someone who has seen or heard something. Just a week after I asked my best friend Paul, he returned with a somber expression. "You were right, Kurt," he said. "What did you hear?" "She's been having lunch with a guy at least once a week. Carol, one of her co-workers, is my cousin. She said it's been happening for at least 3 months now. He picks her up in the parking lot and they return an hour later," Paul told me. Sue works at Mid-States Printing as an administrative assistant, though I suppose calling her a secretary is outdated and considered derogatory now. She's been there for about 15 years, going back to work shortly after our youngest started preschool. I have to admit, for a 48-year-old woman, she still looks great and doesn't even appear to be 40. I'm sure that's why David Perkins found her attractive. He's the scumbag who's been stealing my wife's affections. David is a paper salesman for Heartland Paper, a paper mill in Sioux Falls. He regularly visits Mid-States. I investigated him after Paul gave me the heads up. David Perkins is divorced with 2 kids, aged 7 and 10. From what I gathered, he had been cheating on his wife, she found out, and served him divorce papers. That was 4 years ago. I guess cheaters don't mind getting others to cheat. I wonder if Sue is his only conquest. For her sake, I hope so, but I doubt it. It doesn't really matter now. Sue is left, giving some lame excuse about going away alone for a spa weekend to clear my mind from the tension between us. Alone, what a joke. I know she's going to be with him. Not just for a few hours like she did 2 weeks ago when she took the afternoon off to be with him. Carol called Paul, who called me, when she found out Sue was taking the afternoon off. I took the afternoon off as well, and followed her when she left the parking lot. She drove to the Holiday Inn, and guess who was waiting for her? That's when I called a divorce lawyer and started the process. She would be served sometime during her spa weekend. I just have to call when the GPS tracker in her Yukon XL stops at the final destination. I know some people might say I should have confronted her about what's happening, but after 3 long years without intimacy, you start to question if it's worth it. It's not that your love fades, you just begin to wonder if love is still enough. You start to think maybe you'd both be happier with someone else or even alone. For her sake, I hope she is happy. As for me, I've always been the kind of person who can enjoy myself in almost any situation. Why focus on the negatives when there's so much good around you every day? So here I am, sitting with my phone in hand, tracking her progress as she heads towards her rendezvous with Destiny.
I'm excited but a little nervous as I drive to Sioux Falls. I'll be spending the next 2 nights with David, my friend and lover. He truly understands me. He listens without judgment and doesn't try to fix me or my problems. He expects nothing from me, so what I give him feels like a gift. There are no pressures, no expectations, no whining or begging like my husband Kurt does. Kurt just doesn't understand. When a woman begins to experience changes, she no longer wants intimacy and does not need it as much as in her 20s. She needs someone to listen and love her for who she is. David has been that someone for me for the past 3 months. We started by having lunch together and talking. I can talk to him about anything. He listens and makes me feel special, like I'm more than just a mom or an administrative assistant. 2 weeks ago, he asked if I could take the day off to have some fun. I understood what he was hinting at. He often mentioned how he likes to pamper women and be attentive to their desires and needs. The attention and interest from a man who is 10 years younger than me made me think about a lot. I agreed to take a day off on Thursday afternoon as I had free time. He booked a room at the Holiday Inn. Naturally, I was nervous, but I felt that he knew me and cared about me. I wanted to show him that I care about him too and thank him in a special way. On the way to the hotel, I stopped at the pharmacy. When I arrived at the hotel, David invited me to his room. We sat down and chatted for a while. He praised me for my appearance. "Sue, you always look amazing. You dress so elegantly, professionally, and at the same time very attractive. I do not know how your boss handles the job." I blushed and giggled a little. He's so kind, and I'm glad he noticed my efforts to look good. Then he bent down and kissed me. We've kissed before, but it was just a short goodbye kiss after our dinners, nothing like that. I was thinking, when was the last time Kurt kissed me like that? I know it's been years. We sat hugging and kissing for 10 minutes. Pulling away from him, I muttered, "Let me put on something more comfortable." I got up and disappeared into the bathroom, took off my dress and hung it on the shower rod. Everything else followed. I was ready to do something I hadn't done in over 28 years, make love to another man besides my husband. "Oh, Kurt, what did we do wrong?" I whispered to myself. "Why can't you be like David? Accept me for who I am." Bracing myself, I straightened up, ready to thank David for making me feel desirable and feminine in recent months. When I came out of the bathroom, I found him lying on the bed. "Wow," he breathed, "you look stunning." And so, a miracle happened. What we were going for all this time happened. We lay there, exhausted, for about 30 minutes. Wanting to beat Kurt home, I rose, took a quick shower, and dressed. "Do you think we could get away for a weekend?" David asked me. "I found a bed and breakfast by the river near Sioux Falls, where we can enjoy the view, the countryside, and each other once more. The autumn leaves are just reaching their peak. That sounds lovely, but I'm not sure what I would tell my husband, I replied. Tell him you're going for a spa weekend. Everyone needs some me time. Would he really begrudge you that? I'm not sure he would even notice, I said, reflecting on our deteriorating relationship of late. All right then, I'll arrange it for 2 weeks from this Friday. Sound good? Perfect, David. I enjoy our time together, I affirmed. And you know I do too, he replied. I left thinking that he and I would reunite in just a couple of weeks. I drove straight home and arrived around my usual time, knowing Kurt wouldn't be there. He always works late. There was a twinge of guilt as I entered. This was our home, shared with my husband. Walking through the living room toward the kitchen, I noticed the large family photo above the mantel, then our wedding picture in a frame beside it. I paused and gazed at both. What have I done? I wondered silently. I know Kurt and I haven't been getting along, but does that justify being unfaithful? I can't risk arousing suspicion. I'll just continue as usual. I changed into jeans and a t-shirt in the bedroom, tossing my clothes into the hamper. Then I headed to the kitchen to start dinner, opting to prepare one of his favorites, stuffed pork chops and mashed potatoes.
That day is etched vividly in my memory. It marked the final breakdown of our marriage. She spent over 3 hours in a hotel room. I knew exactly what was happening. It shattered me. It had been more than 3 years since we had been intimate. She avoided even kissing me, saying it always led to me wanting more. The most affection I received was a quick peck on the lips, often without a hug. After she left the hotel, I drove aimlessly, unable to face returning home. I pulled into our garage around 8:30, turned off the engine, and sat there in silence. Just as I was stepping out of the car, she entered from the kitchen. "What were you doing? You just pulled in," she asked. Talking on the phone," I replied, starting the cycle of lies. "I made dinner, but it's cold now. I wish you would let me know when you'll be this late," I said, my tone tinged with irritation. "Sorry, something came up unexpectedly. I might have to work late often in the coming days," I answered truthfully, although I increasingly wanted to avoid her. 2 weeks have passed since then, and now she's heading out the door for her spa weekend. During these past 2 weeks, I've been coming home late every night, and on weekends I've been busy with yard work and preparing the house for winter. We've been living like roommates, but not for much longer. Once she reaches her destination, I'll contact Tom Andrews, the sheriff. One advantage of living in a smaller city is knowing many people like Tom. He and Marcia were friends. We've visited each other's homes countless times. A couple of days ago, I spoke with him and asked if he could serve the divorce papers to my wife. He was taken aback until I explained the situation. "I'm really sorry to hear that, Kurt. You and Sue have been together a long time." "Yeah, well, we haven't been physically together for the past 3 years, I remarked. 3 years? That's surprising. "I guess looking back, there have been moments when there seemed to be some tension between you two," he responded. "Now she's seeing someone else. Part of me wants to retaliate, but another part just says, there's no point in wasting energy on someone who doesn't love you anymore. I'm sorry, Kurt. When do you want the legal papers delivered?" "It looks like Saturday will work. She's supposedly leaving for a spa weekend on Friday. I'll find out where she's staying that night. I plan to track her Yukon's GPS and see where she ends up."
It's a bit over a 3-hour drive from Aberdeen to Sioux Falls, where David has the bed and breakfast reservation, so I grabbed some fast food on the way. I arrived a little after 9, and it seemed David had been watching for me because he came out as soon as I pulled into the driveway. Knowing he was looking out for me made me feel good inside. "I thought you'd never make it," he said. "I was afraid Kurt would forbid you your spa weekend." He doesn't own me, and I wouldn't miss it for the world. I've been looking forward to this since we talked about it 2 weeks ago. "Well, they just started an ice cream social in the dining room. Let's mingle, and then we'll get your bags afterwards," David suggested. "That sounds great." It was another sign that David, unlike Kurt, wanted more from me than just intimacy. He did not offer to go straight to the room. After meeting the hosts and other guests, we gladly treated each other to ice cream with cherries and whipped cream. I could tell that David couldn't wait to get things moving because of how often he touched me. The bed and breakfast is lovely, and the hosts and other guests seemed very friendly. After finishing the ice cream, we took my bags to our room. It's probably the largest one available, and it overlooks the river. I think tomorrow in daylight it will be absolutely amazing in all the colors of autumn.
Sue's GPS had come to a halt. Checking the address, I discovered a bed and breakfast situated there. Now I knew where to deliver the papers. I phoned Tom. "How are you, Kurt?" "Feeling pretty numb right now. I doubt I'll get much sleep tonight. Probably more than she will, though," I replied mournfully. "Don't be too hard on yourself, Kurt. You're taking action. It's best to try and put it out of your mind as much as possible and let the process unfold." 26 years, Tom. 26 years. "Yeah, that's rough. Are you sure you want me to serve these?" he asked. "Is there no chance you two can work things out?" "Tom, it hasn't felt like we were a couple for years now. This just makes it all clear." "Once again, I'm sorry, Kurt." "Thanks." I gave Tom the bed and breakfast's address. He confirmed he'd deliver the divorce papers late morning the next day after making the drive down there. When my lawyer drafted the paperwork, I insisted on citing adultery as the grounds. He warned me that without proof, we might end up switching to irreconcilable differences. "At least this way, the court records will show I tried to file on grounds of adultery," I remarked. I decided to wait until tomorrow to call the kids. I didn't want one of them tipping off their mom. Those calls would be the toughest.
While I'm looking out the window, David comes up behind me and hugs me. Turning to face him, I return his kiss with the same fervor. My hands explore his body. After breaking the kiss, I suggest, "Let me change my clothes." "Don't change anything. You are beautiful, and the way you are," he replies. "But wouldn't you rather I wasn't wearing these clothes?" I tease in a whisper. His eyes widen, and he kisses me. Stepping back, I slowly head to the bathroom, grabbing my bag on the way. Then I put on a bright red plush dress, open the door, and stand so that he can see and admire. "You're beautiful," he breathes. "Just for you," I reply, making my way to his bed. The situation is escalating rapidly. Soon we find ourselves on the bed. I thought it would be a long session, but it was over in a minute. I didn't even have time to relax. "I'm sorry I was so hasty," he apologized. "The anticipation and the sight of you drove me crazy. I promise it will be longer next time," he assured me. After 5 minutes, the second round came, and he already did everything right. Then we lay exhausted. I asked him, "Could you bring a hand towel from the bathroom?" He looked at me questioningly. "Either that or sleep in the wet." He seemed a little annoyed, but he took the towel anyway. I put it down and relaxed, and soon we both fell asleep.
It was a sleepless night. I might have managed only 2 hours of rest. My mind kept dwelling on Sue and that man. Where did our marriage go wrong? In our younger days, we resisted going to work just so we could be together. Reality eventually demanded our attention to work. Yet my thoughts, at least, were always about rushing home to be by her side. When the children came along, our priorities naturally shifted, but we remained a team, albeit a larger one. Now, she has found someone else to be her partner. Our life together is now history. Later this morning, she would be served, and we would each assemble our teams, now on opposite sides of the courtroom. Me with my lawyer, her with hers, battling for whatever remains of our shared life. I lay on my bed, staring into space. I hadn't bothered to change out of my clothes from last night. Perhaps I should get up, take a shower, and change into something respectable that doesn't look like it's been slept in.
I wake up feeling David pressed against me. It's incredibly soothing, like I've been asleep for ages. Looking at my watch, I see that it's already 7:45. We need to move. Breakfast is served until 9. "David, it's time for us to get up. We need to get cleaned up and go downstairs," I tell him. "Let's skip breakfast and pick up where we left off last night," he suggests. "I need to eat some food if we're going to keep going," I tease. "Then make it quick. I want more," he insists from the bed. "I'm going to take a shower first," I decide. That way I can dress appropriately. "Could we take a shower together to save water?" he suggests. "No, we have to focus on preparing for the meeting with the others downstairs," I insist. "Okay, but let's come back here for more soon," he suggests impatiently. Let's see. I would like to take a walk by the river and maybe take a ride around the neighborhood to admire the autumn colors, I plan. It sounds like a nice balance between relaxation and excitement, he comments. He's definitely impatient, I think to myself, amused. I'm flattered that this young man is so passionate about me. I step into the shower, washing away the remnants of last night's activities. After drying off and slipping into a robe, I find him back asleep in the bedroom. Come on, David, shower time. Let's get downstairs while breakfast is still on, I urge. He stirs awake, stretches, and heads to the bathroom. Meanwhile, I dress in slacks and a blouse that shows just a hint of cleavage, pulling my hair into a soft ponytail with a clip. Kurt always liked it this way. Oh, Kurt, I murmur to myself. What happened to us? It's been years since I've felt close to you. Remember when it was just us against the world? Lost in memories of our life, weddings, births, vacations, graduations, and now our son's upcoming wedding. I reflect deeply. The bathroom door opens, and I quickly compose myself, adjusting my makeup as David finishes dressing. I avoid his gaze, not wanting him to see the tears in my eyes. Ready for breakfast? He asks gently. Yes, let's go, I reply softly. We make our way to the dining room, exchanging pleasantries with our hosts and the other couples. The buffet spread is tempting, but I remind myself to watch what I eat, mindful of my figure. We sit quietly while eating. David attempts small talk, but I respond quietly. Glancing around, I notice an older couple celebrating their 50th anniversary and a young couple who seem to be marking their first. Other couples of varying ages are scattered about. It strikes me that David and I are the only ones without wedding rings. Mine had come off during our drive here last night. Finishing my meal quickly, I turn to David. Can we walk by the river now? I'd love to see the views and soak in the colors. Sure, and later this afternoon, we can drive through the countryside and find a place for a late lunch, he replies. As we stroll along the riverbank, David takes my hand and gently caresses it with his thumb. It's so beautiful here, I remark aloud, more to the scenery than to him. Yes, it is, he agrees, but not as beautiful as you. I smile at his compliment. Since taking over as the sales rep for his company in Aberdeen 6 months ago, he has consistently made me feel youthful and attractive despite my 48 years. Let's head back to the room, I suggest. I want to show my gratitude for this wonderful weekend. He looks at me with a broad smile on his face. When we return, I stand in the middle of the room, and we get down to business, so to speak. The preparation has begun. He treated me rudely, and after I gave him pleasure, I made it clear to him that I expected the same from him, but it did not happen. Instead, we moved to the bed, and he began to do what he wanted. Suddenly, there is a knock on the door. I quickly grab my robe and open the door a crack to look out. There's a man in a sheriff's uniform standing there. Opening the door wider, I ask, "How can I help you?" Sue Randolph. The voice sounds familiar. This is Tom Andrews, my good friend, and his wife Marcia, although I rarely see him in uniform and cap. Tom? I'm puzzled. Why is Tom here? I'm surprised. I'm here on official business, he explains. My heart is racing. Footage from a TV show flashes through my head, where police officers inform family members of a death. He's still talking when I interrupt him. Is Kurt okay? No, Sue, he continues, but I'm fixated on the fact that Kurt may be dead. Then I catch him saying that Kurt can't communicate. So he's alive, I blurt out, and I'm overwhelmed with relief. Yes, but he is seriously injured. I cover my mouth with my hand, trying not to suffocate. The door creaks open slowly, revealing David lying on the bed. I flush with embarrassment and anxiety. Then he hands me something and utters, "You've been served," snapping a photo with his phone before turning and walking away. What? I stammer, bewildered. What's going on? What? I repeat, still struggling to grasp the situation. Oh my God, I mutter as I sink to the floor. Look on the bright side, Sue. Now we can go out and not hide anymore. Oh my God, I keep repeating. After a few minutes lying on the floor, I pick myself up and reach for my phone. I try calling Kurt, but it goes straight to voicemail.
I just received a call from Tom. He informed me that I was correct. She was there with another man. He was unclothed on the bed while she was in a robe. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate you telling me, I respond dully. Are you going to be okay? He asks. I'm not sure. Tom? I'll call Marcia and ask her to come over and support you, he suggests. I don't need her to do that. Actually, I just want to be alone, I reply. Thanks. I'll talk to you later. I end the call and turn off my phone. I don't want to talk to anyone. Right now, I just need to contemplate my marriage and what lies ahead.
I need to reach someone, find out which hospital he's in, I rambled. He's not in a hospital, Sue, David replied, looking puzzled. You heard him. He said he's broken and can't talk, I asserted. That's not what he said, Sue. He said his heart has been broken and he can't talk to you. I'm sure he can physically talk. He just doesn't want to. What? Is that what he said? Yes, Sue. You'll soon be a free woman. Thoughts of my marriage and future flooded my mind. They looked bleak. I hurriedly dressed. What are you doing? David asked. I have to go. I need to talk to him. Didn't you tell me you're more like roommates than husband and wife? What's the difference? He questioned. I just need to talk to him, I insisted. What about the room? I've booked it through the weekend, he reminded me. Well, enjoy it, I retorted as I grabbed my bag and headed for the door. Sue, he doesn't want to talk to you, David warned. Then I'll do all the talking and hope he listens, I said firmly, closing the door. My mind raced as I walked to my Yukon, the SUV Kurt had bought for me. What am I going to say? I wondered as I climbed into the Yukon and pulled out of the parking lot. My phone rings, and I check the caller's number, hoping it's Kurt, but David is calling instead. Really? Did you leave? Yes, I left. What about our weekend? How about rediscovering the pleasures we haven't experienced in years? You're going to have to deal with this yourself, I replied, hanging up the phone. Men, I thought, they only think about intimacy. 30 minutes and 5 unanswered calls to Kurt's voicemail later, my phone rang again. Kurt, I'm going home now. Can we talk about this? I hate it, I hear, and then the connection is cut off. Looking at my phone, I realized that it wasn't Kurt, but David. By that time, I didn't care what he thought of me anymore. Another half hour passes, and I make 5 more calls when I see flashing lights behind me. Oh, shit, I mutter, checking the speedometer and finding that I'm doing 97 miles per hour. I wonder what kind of fine I'll get for speeding at 17 miles per hour. When I come to a stop, the police officer takes his time approaching my car door, likely running my license plates. Generally, I'm a careful driver. It's been over 15 years since my last ticket. I hope he might just give me a warning. As he walks towards my window, I lower it and have my license and registration ready to hand over. What's the hurry? He asks me. I need to get home to my husband. There's been a mix-up and he's not answering my calls, I explain. He gives me a curious look. Why isn't he answering? He inquires, examining my license. He's upset with me, I reply. While he stands there, I notice him glance at the manila envelope on my passenger seat. He gestures towards it, saying, Looks like more than just a mix-up. At that moment, tears start streaming down my face. Where are you coming from? Sioux Falls, I reply, sniffing. That's quite a trek from Aberdeen. What were you doing in Sioux Falls? His tone suggests he suspects the reason. Just being foolish, I mutter softly. He returns my license and registration along with a speeding ticket. Try to keep it under the limit, he advises, heading back to his patrol car. Damn men, all they ever want is to take advantage. I grumble as I merge back onto the road, gradually accelerating to 79 miles per hour and setting the cruise control. I glance in my rearview mirror as he follows me for about 5 miles, my frustration mounting with each passing minute. Over the next hour, I attempt to call Kurt a dozen times. For heaven's sake, Kurt, turn your phone on! I shout in exasperation.
It's been around 90 minutes since Tom called me. I've been lounging in my lazy boy, thinking it's time to call the kids. How do I tell them this? I mutter aloud. As I power on my phone, I notice several voicemails from Sue. I'm not eager to hear her messages. I decide to dial Glenn first, my eldest. Hi, Dad, he answers. Hey, Glenn, how's the new job treating you? Fantastic, Dad. Can't believe they're paying me to design buildings. I'm loving every bit of it. That's great to hear. Hope it stays that way till you retire. So what's up? Why are you calling? Well, son, I have something important to tell you. Are you all right, Dad? I'm physically fine, but emotionally no. What's wrong? Glenn, there's no easy way to say this. I'm divorcing your mother. There was stunned silence on the other end of the line. After about a minute, he asked softly, What did she do? I could tell from his tone he had already guessed. She's chosen to be with someone else rather than me. Really? What the hell? How long has this been happening? He demanded. I'm not exactly sure, but I think it's been a few months, I replied. Man, I'm really sorry you're going through this, Dad. Yeah, I'm sorry to have to tell you. So what's your plan now? He asked. I served her the divorce papers this morning. I'm ending it. Do you think you can't work things out? He inquired. Glenn, if Janie cheated on you, what would you do? I asked him. He thought for a moment and then said firmly, She'd be out. I'd kick her out. Janie is Glenn's long-term girlfriend. In fact, Glenn had told me confidentially that he plans to propose to her on New Year's Eve. He's already put a ring on layaway. I'm thrilled for them. Please don't call your sisters. I want to be the one to inform them. I'll try to reach out to them this evening. I won't, Dad. I'll call you later tonight to discuss this further. Thank you, Glenn. I appreciate your understanding. We'll get through this, Dad. Don't resent your mom for this. This is something between her and me. She's still your mom, and will need your support through this. I'm not sure how much support I can give her, Dad, he admitted. I understand, but you have to try, I replied. Okay, Dad. She's still my mom. I love her, even though I don't like what she's done. I understand, Glenn. I still love her too, but I'm finding it hard to like her right now. I'm sorry, Dad. You don't deserve this. Take care, son. You too, Dad. Bye for now. See you, Dad. I hung up and sat there, lost in thought, staring into space. Just then my phone rang and I answered it reflexively. Hello? I said. There was silence for a moment on the other end of the line. Then a voice spoke up. Kurt? Oh, Kurt, thank you for picking up. We really need to talk about this. I ended the call. It was Sue, and I wasn't ready to talk to her. I powered off my phone and sat there contemplating. I knew I would have to talk to her eventually, but not now.
I managed to reach Kurt on the phone, but he disconnected the call before I could express myself. I was genuinely surprised he picked up. I had encountered his voicemail so frequently that I didn't anticipate speaking to him directly. Now that he had answered, it really struck me. What would I say to him? How could I explain my actions? Saying sorry was a start, but what else? I decided I needed time to gather my thoughts before our next conversation. Lost in contemplation, I heard a ding and wondered, what was that? Glancing around the Yukon and then at the dashboard, I saw the low fuel warning. I had never seen that before. Kurt always kept my tank full, sparing me the need to pump gas myself. Uncertain how far I could drive, I immediately began searching for a gas station. I found one, not one of the more famous ones, but it had gas, which was what mattered. Parking, I grabbed my purse and retrieved my debit card. After inserting it, entering my PIN, and pulling out the nozzle, I realized the gas cap was on the other side of the truck. Damn, I muttered, hanging the nozzle back and maneuvering the Yukon to face the pump. I reinserted my debit card and retrieved the nozzle. However, I couldn't open the gas tank door. I tried pulling on it, but there was no grip to pry it open. I didn't recall seeing a button on the dashboard to release it either. Looking around, I noticed there was no one else at the pumps to ask for assistance. Frustrated, I returned the nozzle and went inside. Behind the counter, a man was absorbed in a Jerry Springer rerun on TV, the audience uproarious. "Excuse me," I ventured. He glanced at me, barely taking his eyes off the screen. "Can I help you?" "I can't figure out how to open my gas cap," I admitted. After inspecting my car briefly, he asked, "How long have you been driving it?" "A couple of years, but my husband usually handles refueling." "Just push on the right edge of the door and it will pop open," he advised. Suddenly, the noise from the TV crowd escalated into anger. The man behind the counter glanced at the screen and muttered quietly, "What a difficult woman." "What?" I asked. "Not you," he clarified, gesturing towards the TV. I glanced over and saw the caption at the bottom of the screen. "I've cut my husband off, but not my boyfriend." I stood there, watching as the woman continued. "He's a great father and provider, but he no longer satisfies me in bed." I was speechless. The attendant broke the silence. "I can't believe she'd do that to him." I felt compelled to defend her. Maybe she just needed to feel desired. "If her husband can't make her feel that way, she should just divorce him," he retorted. "If I were him, I'd leave her without a second thought." I couldn't respond. It reminded me too much of what Kurt was doing to me. Blushing, I turned and left, heading mindlessly towards my Yukon. I opened the fuel tank cover, removed the cap, and pulled out the nozzle to insert it into the tank. Turning back, I attempted to use my debit card, but it wouldn't authorize. I returned inside and asked the attendant for help. "Let me try it here," he offered. After attempting without success, he asked, "Do you have a different card?" "Oh no," I worried. "Did Kurt cancel my card?" I quickly retrieved my purse and handed him my MasterCard. Fortunately, it worked. "You're all set." "I was starting to wonder if your cards had been canceled," he remarked, with a look suggesting he thought they might be soon. I completed filling up and drove away, anxiously pondering the potential consequences. Trying to reach Kurt again, I was only met with voicemail once more.
I was surprised to hear Sue's voice when I answered the phone. I had been expecting a call back from Glenn, thinking he had something to discuss with me. What would I say when I spoke to Sue? Curious about where she was calling from, I checked her GPS and saw she was just over halfway back to Aberdeen. I didn't want to talk to her. I needed to be somewhere else when she returned. I went upstairs and packed a few bags. Returning to the living room, my eyes fell on the picture above the mantel, a family photo taken when the kids were young. Those had been happier times, despite financial struggles. We were content raising our 3 children. Beside it was our wedding picture. I stared at it, grappling with the devastation of our broken family. With a surge of emotion, I grabbed the photo off the mantel and struck it with my fist, shattering the glass and cutting my knuckles. I removed my wedding band, placing it on the mantel beside the photo, face down. Looking around, I left the door unlocked and walked out to my car. Driving away, I decided to spend the night in a hotel. After checking in, I phoned Julia, my second child. "Hey, Jules," I greeted her with my nickname for her. "Hi, Dad, what's going on?" "Can we talk?" I asked. "Of course, Dad. Is everything okay?" "It's serious, honey." "Go ahead, I'm listening." "Jules, your mom and I are facing some challenges." "Dad, you and Mom had issues even before I went off to college 2 years ago. What's happening now?" "Well, you know we both love you and all of you guys, but recent events have brought things to a head. There's no easy way to say this. We're getting divorced." "Dad, I'm sorry to hear that, but honestly, it's not surprising. You two were already having a lot of arguments before I left for college. It seemed like you were never at ease around each other. I don't know all the details, but I can tell you this. You weren't the same parents I grew up with." That was my daughter Jules, always the observant one. She could sense when Glenn or Rachel were troubled long before Sue and I noticed anything. "Well, this had nothing to do with you kids. It was something between me and your mom." "So, have you guys tried counseling? It could help." "I think it's beyond that now, honey," I replied. "I wish you'd consider it, Dad. I hate to see either of you alone." "I'll think about it," I said, though not very convincingly. "Really, Dad, think about it. Talk to someone before you decide to give up." "I'll think about it," I said more firmly this time. I've already talked to Glenn and I'll call Rachel later. Don't worry, Jules. I'll keep you updated. Thanks, Dad, she said, her voice catching. I could tell she was on the verge of tears. I'll let you go. I love you. Remember that. We both love you. Now it was my turn to fight back tears. Love you too, Dad. I hung up the phone and turned it off. I couldn't speak. I was overwhelmed with emotion. Why is she doing this to us? I muttered aloud. Sitting on the bed in the hotel room, I cried for about 10 minutes. 26 years felt like they were slipping away.
I pulled into the driveway and saw that Kurt's car wasn't there. Deep down, I already knew it wouldn't be. Stepping out, I approached the front door. Surprisingly, it swung open without needing my key. This was unusual. It suggested Kurt might still be inside, perhaps with his car in the garage. Entering cautiously, I called out his name. Silence greeted me. He had to be here. He never left the door unlocked. Walking further in, the house felt strangely empty. Glancing around, nothing seemed different at first. Then my gaze fell on the family picture still hanging above the fireplace, a reminder of happier times. But then I saw our wedding photo, face down on the mantel. I lifted it gently, realizing the glass was shattered, shards mingling with Kurt's wedding ring. Oh my God, what have I done?
After I finished crying, I turned my phone back on to call Rachel, my daughter. Hey, Dad, I tried calling you, but it went to voicemail. I couldn't leave a message, though. It's full. Hi, Rachel. What did you need? Dad, Julia called me. Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to ask her not to contact you yet. I wanted to tell you first. What did she say? You're getting a divorce. Is that true? Yes, I've filed, I confirmed. Well, I can't say I didn't see it coming. Huh? I replied. Dad, you and Mom were arguing for a couple of years, then about a year and a half ago, you just stopped. You hardly talked. All you discussed were bills, work around the house, and whether you were going to a friend's house that weekend. I needed a moment to absorb it. My youngest daughter had concluded years ago that my wife and I weren't really functioning as a married couple anymore. So the news of our divorce didn't catch her off guard. She didn't even inquire about the reasons or the timing. Wow. I guess I hadn't fully realized that, I responded to her. Dad, we all know you both love us, but I'm not sure if you love each other. If you do, you haven't shown it. Dad, you have to do what will make you happy. I wouldn't want you stuck in a loveless marriage just because you feel obligated or because of us kids. We're all adults now. Rachel, you've always been straightforward, thank you. Your clarity makes this decision easier. I love you. I love you too, Dad. I'll support you no matter what. I'm here for you. You're my dad. I was getting emotional. I need to go, I said. I'll call you tomorrow. I ended the call and powered off my phone. At that moment, I really didn't feel like talking to anyone.
My phone rang, and I saw Julia was calling me. How would I approach this conversation? After the third ring, I answered. Hi, Julia. How are you doing? How are you doing is the better question. Fine. Why? I asked, hoping Kurt hadn't spoken to our children. Dad called me, she said. What did he say? I asked, uncertain of what she knew. I hoped she wasn't aware of anything. He told me you two are getting a divorce. I gasped. We're not getting a divorce. It's just a misunderstanding. Well, it sounded more serious when I talked to him. We'll work through this, I assured her, trying to convince myself as well. Rachel said he already filed, she informed me. Yeah, I was served this morning, I said solemnly. I remember before I left for college, there was a lot of tension, and you guys were fighting a lot. Rachel said after I left, you guys stopped fighting and hardly talked. Had it really been going on for that long? After years of conflict and walking on eggshells around each other, it actually felt good not to fight anymore. We just went about our days, taking care of what needed to be done. I think it would be beneficial for you and Dad to attend counseling. It might help you both reconcile, she suggested. That sounds like a good idea. I'll bring it up with him when I manage to reach him, I replied. What do you mean? I've been trying to call him, but he hasn't answered. I'm at home now, and he's not here. Do you know where he went? Did he mention anything when you spoke with him? No, Mom. I thought he was at home with you. No, he's left. If I know your father, he's gone somewhere I won't easily find him. I pondered where he might be, perhaps at a hotel or a friend's house. I should check if he's taken any clothes. Walking into our room, I noticed open doors and drawers. Julia, I need to try to locate your father. I'll call you if I find him. If you hear from him, please ask him to call me. Of course, Mom. I'll call you tomorrow unless I hear from him sooner. Thank you, Julia. I love you. I know, Mom. I love you too.
I wasn't particularly hungry, but having not eaten all day, I decided to order a pizza for delivery. As I ate, thoughts of Rachel's words lingered in my mind. We hadn't really been much of a couple for the past 3 years. Damn menopause. If only she had opted for hormone replacement therapy, maybe it could have eased a lot of these issues. That decision marked the beginning of it all. Her doctor had recommended it to help her through menopause, but she refused any medication. Even after Rachel was born, I had to use contraception because she didn't want to risk pregnancy and avoided birth control pills. I enjoyed the freedom and didn't use them when we were trying to get pregnant. So in the end, I decided to have a vasectomy. When the pizza arrived, I sat on the bed watching TV and eating. There wasn't much worth watching on a Saturday night, and my mind wasn't really focused. It was just background noise.
I switched on the television, hoping for distraction from my turmoil, but nothing captured my attention. My thoughts raced while the TV droned on in the background. The sight of the empty closet and drawers hit me hard. Oddly enough, receiving divorce papers hadn't felt as real. Seeing tangible evidence that my husband had left drove home the reality. I couldn't talk my way out of this. Perhaps my marriage was truly over. I decided not to face the empty space tonight. Instead, I would sleep in one of the kids' rooms. Oh my God, I need to call Glenn and Rachel, try to get them on my side. Maybe if they talk to Kurt, they can convince him to talk to me, or consider marital counseling. I dialed Glenn's number. It rang 4 times before Janie answered. Glenn, it's your mother. You've got to talk to her, I pleaded. I don't want to talk to her. Glenn's voice came from the background. Glenn, take the phone. You need to talk to her, Janie insisted. Then said to me, He'll be right with you, Mom. Well, that answers one of my questions. Kurt must have told him why he's divorcing me. Mom, he said flatly. Oh, Glenn, I need your help to convince your dad to talk to me. I don't even want to talk to you. Why would Dad want to? He replied. Oh my God, this might have ruined my relationship with my son as well as my husband, I thought to myself. Glenn, I don't know what your father has said to you, but I believe we can resolve this if he would just speak with me. I doubt it, Mom. Besides, I don't know where he is, and if you can't reach him, I'm sure he's turned off his phone. Well, if you hear from him, please ask him to call me. Okay, Mom, but I'm not going to plead with him. Thank you, Glenn. I love you. He hung up without saying goodbye. Next, I called Rachel. Hi, dear, how are you? I asked, trying to keep the conversation light. I'm okay, Mom. How are you? She sounded equally lighthearted. I wondered why. Have you heard from your father? I inquired. Yeah, he called earlier today. Honestly, Mom, I expected that call a year ago, shortly after I left for college. Why do you say that? Mom, you and Dad hardly spoke at all during my last year at home. I never saw you touch each other, let alone kiss. I think both of you need to find someone you can be happy with. Rachel, my youngest, was always pragmatic. I feel sorry for the guy she ends up with. She'll always tell it like it is, and if he doesn't like it, she won't care. Then again, maybe she'll find someone who can handle her straightforwardness. Could you please ask him to speak with me? I'd really appreciate it. I know he values your opinion. Sure, Mom. I hope he reaches out to you. Me too, Rachel. Me too, I replied as we hung up. My son was angry with me, and my youngest daughter seemed indifferent to whether we stayed married or not. Wow, I've really messed things up. I stayed awake until almost midnight, hoping for a call from my children or husband. With none forthcoming, I finally decided to go to bed alone. Sleeping in Julia's room offered some comfort. At least she wanted us to seek counseling.
I was exhausted. To be honest, I hadn't slept much in the past 2 weeks and I was completely drained. The day's adrenaline had worn off completely. I crawled into bed and fell into a deep sleep, not waking up until 11 on Sunday morning. After a quick shower and skipping shaving, I reheated some pizza for breakfast. I decided to call the kids to let them know I was okay. They were relieved to hear from me and mentioned that Sue had called and asked me to reach out to her. I made up my mind that today was the day. We needed to talk, and unless something drastic happened, I was going forward with the divorce. I dialed her familiar number and she answered immediately. "Oh, Kurt, thank you for calling. First, I want to apologize," she said. "The kids asked me to call you. What do you want?" I responded flatly. "I want us to talk. Can we do that?" "We are talking right now." "Go ahead," I replied. "No, I mean face to face. Will you come home so we can sit down and discuss this together?" I paused for a moment, then said, "Sure, I need to pick up a few things I left there anyway." That should have made my position clear to her. "Can you come over at 2 Crow?" she asked, brushing aside my previous remark. "Sure, will your partner be away by then?" I intended to sting a bit with that. "Oh, Kurt, I'm sorry, there is no one else." "I'll see you at 2I." I hung up. I wondered if someone else was there now, or had been earlier. Maybe I'd do a bit of reconnaissance and find out for myself. I jumped into my car and drove past her house. No cars were in the driveway, but perhaps he parked in the garage. I parked down the street and observed for about half an hour. No one arrived or departed. Well, I guess she was telling the truth about that. I should probably shave before I go back, I muttered to myself. I returned to the hotel, shaved, dressed in smart business casual attire, and even applied a bit of aftershave. Let her see what she's let go.
He finally gave me a call. His tone was brief and devoid of emotion, and he even made a spiteful remark, but he agreed to come over at 2 o'clock. I needed to prepare myself. First, I planned to cook a wonderful dinner so we could talk while we ate. After that, I intended to dress up nicely to show him what he was about to lose. The encounter I parked on the street, setting the tone from the outset. "I'd rather not park in my own driveway," was the message. Why is he parking on the street when the driveway is clear and he could even park in the garage? I wondered to myself. As he approached the driveway, I noticed he was dressed nicely for a day off. He usually wore a t-shirt and jeans. I needed to greet him at the door and thank him for coming. Sue opened the door, wearing a concerned smile. She looked dressed up. Is that for me, or does she have a date tonight? I pondered. As I greeted Kurt at the door, my smile probably seemed forced. I was relieved to see him, but anxious about what was to come. "Why did you park on the street?" "Oh, and thank you for coming," I said nervously. "You're welcome. I wasn't sure if anyone needed to get out of the garage," he replied, a hint of anger crossing Sue's face. Good. My remark had its desired effect. This meeting wasn't going to be easy. Kurt's comment annoyed me, but I chose not to react. I wanted this meeting to be pleasant, focusing on our future together. If I had to tolerate a bit of immaturity from my husband, so be it. "Please come in. I've prepared dinner and it's ready. Take a seat at the table." I came to discuss, not to eat. "Can't we do both? We can have a pleasant meal while we talk through our issues." "No, I don't want to eat. I need to be somewhere right after this." I lied. Actually, I had nowhere else to go, but she didn't need to know that. Is that why he's dressed up? I thought to myself. Already meeting someone new right after leaving here. "Oh," I replied. "Can't you cancel your plans then? Who were you meeting anyway?" I regretted asking as soon as the words left my mouth. "I don't have plans. I don't date when I'm married, unlike someone I know," she retorted. That hit a nerve. Oh, damn, I thought. I've messed this up. How could I say that? I apologize, Kurt. I let my emotions get the best of me. Were they getting the best of you Friday night and Saturday too? I challenged her. Kurt, I'm really sorry. Please forgive me. I'm not sure that's possible, Sue. As I said it, I saw her shoulders slump. She might think she's lost this round, but I'm just getting started. Well, you asked me to come here to talk, so let's talk. I moved into the living room and settled into the armchair, while she took a seat across from me on the sofa. All right, Kurt, I truly am sorry, she said. Are you sorry for what you did, or that you got caught? I sat there for a moment, pondering. Which one was it? If I were honest, I regretted being caught. If I hadn't been caught, I'd still be there until tonight. I did feel remorse for hurting him now that he knew. I'm sorry I hurt you, I finally said. That doesn't answer my question, Sue, she replied, clearly grappling with her thoughts. Kurt, I don't know, I murmured. Sue, you must answer all my questions truthfully. If you lie, we can't have a relationship, Kurt asserted. I will, Kurt. Ask me anything. Did you feel guilty driving to Sioux Falls on Friday night? Yes, I admitted truthfully. Where did you meet him? How did it escalate to this? He's a salesman who visits our company weekly. He's always been very friendly to me. So how did everything develop from meeting him briefly once a week to spending weekends with him? When Kurt mentioned intimacy, I recoiled. It was just intimacy. I care about David, but the truth is, it wouldn't last long. After all, I'm married, at least for now, I reasoned. He invited me to lunch, and I agreed. What harm could it do? Well, tell me, what harm could it do? Initially, none, if it had been just one lunch, but we began meeting weekly when he came for his sales calls. How long has this been going on? A few months. And you didn't see any issue with that? He was so kind and flattering, made me feel youthful again. So, flattery and being nice is all it takes for you to succumb? It's been over 3 years since I've had any. No, Kurt, it's not just that. We got comfortable, and then he suggested we go away for the weekend. So, he's not the first? Surely others have been kind and complimentary to you before. When was the first time? I've never done this before him, Kurt. You have to believe me. No, I don't have to believe you, I exclaimed. When was the first time, and with whom? Friday night with David. She deceived me. You don't spend hours in a hotel room just talking. I rose silently and headed towards the door. Where is he going? I wondered as he stood and walked away. He's heading for the door. Kurt, don't leave, we're not finished talking, I called out, rising to follow him. He turned back, his face a mix of sorrow and anger. Sue, you lied to me. I made it clear that honesty was crucial for us to have any kind of relationship. But you lied, Sue. You lied. Oh my God, I did lie, I realized. How did he find out about our time together a couple of weeks ago? I feel so foolish. Of course he knew. How else could he have had the papers served? I sank back onto the couch, burying my face in my hands, tears streaming down. I'm sorry, Kurt. I did lie. We were together once before, about 2 weeks ago. I took an afternoon off, and we went to a hotel. How did he discover that? He had worked late that night. I had even prepared his favorite meal, which went cold waiting for him to come home. Oh God, he knew. He must have deliberately come home late, and I ended up yelling at him for not calling, I realized. So, where do we go from here, Kurt? I asked quietly. Get yourself a lawyer, and we'll proceed with the divorce. So, you're willing to end a strong marriage because of this? Yep, 23 years of a good marriage wasted. It's actually been 26 years, Kurt. He couldn't even recall how long we'd been married. Yes, but only 23 years were good. The last 3 were a waste of my time. I was furious now. How could he consider the last 3 years a waste? Go to hell, Kurt. Not for the last 3 years. What does that mean? I demanded. Not for the last 3 years? What are you saying? I mean, we haven't had intimacy in over 3 years. So it's all about intimacy? Yes, in the vicinity. You have denied this to your husband for more than 3 years. How many discussions and arguments have we had about this? I've thought about it. We haven't been intimate in over 3 years, ever since menopause hit, and I didn't want or need it anymore. I tried to initiate, pleaded even, but you just told me to deal with it. Well, I guess this is how I'm dealing with it. I regret it took me so long. So you're ending our marriage? Rachel noticed it long before I did. She told me yesterday that I need to prioritize my happiness and not stay in a loveless marriage just because we're supposed to, I explained. So, you're ending our marriage. What do you think we should do, Sue? Julia thinks counseling would help. I agree. And what's the point of that, Sue? So we can find happiness together, like we promised in our vows. Nice. I remember those vows. I also remember forsaking all others. Did you forget that? Or does it not matter anymore? As far as I'm concerned, when you broke your vows, everything else became meaningless. But I still love you, Kurt. You have a funny way of showing it, I replied. Goodbye, Sue. Get a lawyer. And with that, I walked out the door. He left. With him went all my hopes for a pleasant dinner and conversation. I had wanted to explain myself, to make him understand my need to feel desired, especially by someone a decade younger than me. Now, as an older woman unable to bear children, I felt myself trudging towards the end of the road. I sat there, crying for who knows how long, maybe an hour, until the ringing of my phone snapped me out of my daze. Glancing at the screen, I saw it was Julia. Mom, are you all right? Did Dad call you? I asked him to. Yeah, Julia, he did. He came over, we argued, and then he left. Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry. Did he explain why he's filing for divorce? I already knew, Julia. He made it very clear. So why? I had to confront the truth. There was no point in hiding it any longer. Everyone would find out eventually. I cheated on him, I admitted quietly. What? I made a terrible mistake, and he found out. He served me with divorce papers while I was with the other man. I feel ashamed beyond words. I never wanted any of this. How could I have been so foolish? Now I'll soon be a divorced, nearly 50-year-old fool. Tears welled up once more. I couldn't believe I had any left to cry. Oh, Mom, how could you? I knew things weren't good between you and Dad, but how could you? I'm sorry, Julia. I know we've been arguing a lot, but I still love him. And now he's gone. Maybe he just needs some time. Perhaps you two could work things out with counseling. I wish I could believe that, but I don't have much hope. Your dad is so proud and stubborn. He'll never forgive me. So, because of his male pride and ego, he's willing to end your marriage? I asked him that too, but honestly, our marriage hasn't been much for years, and it's all my fault. I started crying harder and dropped the phone. Mom, 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 Julia yelled. I picked up the phone. Sorry, honey, I dropped it. Mom, I'm coming home. Maybe I can talk to Dad and we can figure this out together. Honey, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't care. I'm coming home. I'll see you in a few hours. My daughter was going to come home from college to try to convince her dad to take back his unfaithful wife. What had I done? My selfish desire for someone else's attention has torn my life apart, and my family is paying the price.
I just finished talking to Julia. She's coming back from college to see if she can save our marriage, but it's beyond saving. 3 years of dealing with Sue's nonsense has made me lose hope in our relationship. And when she gave someone else what she denied me all the time, that was the final straw that ended our marriage. I don't usually drink, but I was planning to go to the nearest bar. I turned off my phone and walked out of my hotel room. Let them try to track me down.
Julia arrived and attempted to reach Kurt, but his phone went straight to voicemail, indicating it was turned off. Since it was getting late, I decided to simply go to bed. I planned to call in sick to work the next day and hoped to connect with Kurt then.
I spent a couple of hours casually drinking several beers. I wasn't intoxicated, but I wasn't feeling bad either. I set my phone alarm for 6 a.m. and checked my messages. There were a couple from my wife, the usual apologies. Then there were 2 from Julia, asking if we could meet up tomorrow after I finished work. However, I wasn't planning to go to work because I had other responsibilities, meeting with my lawyer and handling some banking matters. For now, though, I intended to sleep off this slight buzz and hoped I wouldn't wake up with a hangover in the morning.
I didn't sleep much, though I did manage to get some rest. I was exhausted from the weekend's events. I woke up to the smell of bacon. Kurt always made breakfast on the weekends. Was it all a dream, or rather a nightmare? Was it Saturday morning, and was I still happily married? Then Julia called out from downstairs, and I knew the nightmare was real. I got up and called in sick to work. There was no way I could go in today. I had too much to do. Julia and I needed to plan how to get Kurt back. I also had to get my other two children on board, and Janie as well. Kurt liked her and thought she'd be good for Glenn. Breakfast was good. I hadn't eaten much yesterday, and the meal I made for Kurt ended up in the fridge as leftovers. I guess Julia and I will share those. I called Rachel and Glenn, leaving messages for them to call me back. Rachel was probably in class, and Glenn was at work. I called Janie, who had Mondays off from her retail job. "Hi, Janie. This is Glenn's mom. Do you have time to talk?" "Sure, Mom." She had been calling me that for the past year. It felt good to know she liked me and was comfortable enough to do so. "How is Glenn?" "He's really upset. He wouldn't even discuss it." "Janie, could you ask him to call me? I need to talk to him about his dad." "What's going on, Mom?" "I did something that upset his dad, and now he wants to end our marriage." "Oh no, I can't believe that. You've been married for over 25 years. No matter what happened, I believe love conquers all, and you can work it out." "I think we can if Kurt would just give us a chance. That's why I'm calling. Would you be willing to call Kurt and talk to him? Tell him how much you'd hate it if we were to get a divorce?" "Sure, Mom. Anything for you. Someday, I'd like to give you grandchildren, and I want you two to still be together." "Thanks, Janie. I'd like that too."
I woke up and called into work. After that, I showered and got dressed. I felt pretty good, all things considered. I had a slight headache, but it was manageable. The first thing I needed to do was grab breakfast, then call my lawyer to set up an appointment. When I reached him, he said he had time later in the morning. Before that, I could go to the bank. Afterward, I would need to look for an apartment. At the bank, I opened a new account, paid off the credit card, and split our funds, putting half into my account. Leaving the bank, I turned on my phone to get a list of apartment complexes. As it powered up, I saw I had voicemails and messages. Julia had called and texted me. She wanted to meet up. It annoyed me that Sue had made her leave college to come home and help her deal with this. I called her back. "Hey, Jules, you shouldn't have skipped school. I came home to see if I could save your marriage. This is between your mother and me. You don't need to get involved. Dad, it's our family. I'm trying to save it." I thought about what she said and replied, "We'll still be a family even if your mother and I aren't together anymore. That won't change." "Dad, can we sit down and talk? I'd like to hear your side. I've already heard Mom's." "Okay, let's have lunch. How about Applebee's at 12:30? I figured I'd be done meeting with the lawyer by then." "Sure, Dad. See you there." "Just you, Jules. Not your mother." I thought Sue might come along if I didn't specify. "Okay, Dad," she said, sounding a bit disappointed. After meeting with the lawyer, I felt optimistic. He mentioned that with the photo Tom had taken when serving Sue, proving adultery as the reason for the divorce should be straightforward. I hadn't seen the photo, nor did I want to. As long as it helped me secure a 70-30 split in the divorce, I didn't care what it depicted. I asked the lawyer about the procedures, and he explained, "It's now up to Sue and her lawyer to decide how much they want to contest this. Then the judge will make a decision." At 12:30, I met Julia for lunch. We sat down and ordered, and then she asked me, "Dad, do you love her?" I pondered for a moment, having thought about this all weekend. I don't think I do. I still have feelings, but after much reflection, the answer is no. Too much has happened that has driven us apart. I still care for her as the mother of my children and someone I shared years with, but the love is gone. As I spoke, I noticed her expression change from hopeful to despairing. "Jules, I will always love you and your siblings. That will never change. I just can't see us recovering from this." She sat there in silence. "Jules, you're all grown and off to college. Soon you'll get married and start your own family. We'll still be your parents, just living in separate homes. I thought you guys would last forever. Jules, you've had a few relationships. What do you think are the key aspects of a good relationship, a good marriage?" She took a deep breath, thought for a minute, and said, "Well, love, first of all, I just told you I don't think I love her anymore. What else? Respect. Do you think I have much respect for your mom right now? Do you think she respects me, knowing what she did? I don't know. What else? I asked. Commitment, she said. What do you mean by that? I asked. Sticking with it when times get tough. Times have been tough for over 3 years, Julia. How long should I endure that? I don't know. Okay, what else? Patience and forgiveness. I've been patient, but I don't think I can forgive her for what she's done. It was only one time, Dad. No, it wasn't just one time. It might have been only one guy, but it was at least once plus a weekend together. She said it was one time. You need to talk to your mom about that. What I say won't change your mind. What else do you think makes a good marriage? Honesty. Do you think your mom was honest with me? No. So I guess another aspect is trust. I'm sure you won't trust her anymore. No. I don't think I can. What else? I asked. Good communication. Jules, before you left for college, what do you remember about our communication? You were either fighting or barely talking at all. Is there anything else that makes a good marriage? Selflessness, a willingness to do things for your partner even if you don't want to. That's a good one. You've missed one aspect. What do you think that is? Well, of course, physical intimacy, but that goes without saying. Could you ask your mother about that and see what she thinks? I suggested. Julia gave me a puzzled look. At that moment, the waitress arrived with our food. Jules, let's enjoy our meal and switch topics. Let's make this a great father-daughter lunch. All right, she agreed, though I could see she was still processing everything we had discussed. By the end of the meal, we were talking about school, boys, politics. Almost everything, except the elephant in the room. Jules, tell your mom to get a lawyer. It's the only way we'll be able to resolve anything. I will, Dad, she replied, resigned. That afternoon, I went to Central Park. I sat on a bench simply watching people and enjoying the autumn day. As I sat there, I reflected on my conversation with Julia. She had accurately pinpointed many of the reasons why I was divorcing Sue. I just hoped the process would be quick, but I had my doubts. On Tuesday, I was back at work, though my mind wasn't really on my job. I was thinking about Sue and the jerk who would pursue a married woman. He had to face consequences somehow. Karma can be cruel, but I wanted to give her a little push. I needed to find out more about this David Perkins. All I knew was that he was a 38-year-old divorced man with 2 kids who worked at Heartland Paper. So, I called a private investigator. I gave him all the information I had, paid a deposit with my debit card, and asked him to get back to me with any dirt he could find. I know it's foolish to waste money on this, but I needed information. If Sue continued seeing him, it would only fuel the fire of our marriage's demise. Around 3 in the afternoon, my friend and colleague Eric Van Dorn poked his head into my office and asked, "Are you free for lunch tomorrow?" "If you're paying, I'm free all week," I replied. "No, we're splitting the bill. You know what they say," he retorted. Yeah, if you ain't Dutch, you ain't much." He'd said it so many times I could hear it in my sleep. "I'll swing by around noon tomorrow then, okay?" he confirmed. "Sure," I agreed. Eric is our plant's purchasing executive. It's a fancy title for someone who buys supplies, and he really gets into it. If I didn't know better, I'd think he was a woman the way he likes to shop, but with other people's money, of course. Plus, being Dutch, he always finds the best deals. I wouldn't call him cheap, but only because I don't badmouth my friends. That night, I was sitting in my hotel room, still undecided about which apartment to rent. I didn't feel rushed. I wanted a nice one since I might be there for a while. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered it anyway. "Hi, Dad." It was actually Janie, not my biological daughter, but after she and Glenn had been dating for about a year, I insisted she call me Dad. "Hi, Janie, how can I help you?" You can forgive your wife, she said bluntly. That's not going to happen anytime soon, Janie, I replied curtly. Why not? Don't you love her? Isn't she your wife? Doesn't she deserve your forgiveness? Janie, this isn't a conversation we need to be having, I said sternly. I believe love can conquer all, so I think you can move past this. Janie, I don't mean to be rude, but the problems between Sue and me are ours to fix or not fix. Don't try to interfere. She stammered. Goodbye. Janie. I hung up. I was furious. Sue was having others try to guilt me into taking her back. She's the one who should feel guilty, not me. Now I was all worked up and knew I wouldn't be able to sleep anytime soon. I decided to go to the exercise room and run on the treadmill. Running helps me burn off some pent-up energy while allowing my mind to process things. I reflected on my life and all the good times I had experienced. Those memories would remain with me regardless of my marital status. But what would the future hold if I chose to reconcile with her? The thought of staying married haunted me because I knew I could never forget her betrayal, both during the 3 years prior and the affair itself. I would always harbor resentment towards her. What kind of marriage would that be? Would I constantly seek revenge for her actions? Even if I somehow managed to stay married, what kind of life would it be? Just a continuation of the last 3 miserable years. No, thank you. I glanced down at the treadmill. I had run 4 miles without even noticing. Maybe getting angry before running was beneficial. It might even help me run a marathon. I stepped off the treadmill and toweled off as I made my way back to my room. Exhausted, I knew I would sleep well tonight.
I returned to work today, feeling distracted but still managing to do my job. Coming home, however, felt hollow. Julia had left for school early that morning. To distract myself, I started doing laundry. As I carried a basket of dry clothes to our bedroom, my phone rang. Placing the clothes on the bed, I answered the call. It was Janie. Mom, I think Kurt is angry with me. I called him and suggested he forgive you, but he shut me down quickly. He's so stubborn. All men are, Janie, I replied. Well, I think he's being unreasonable. You and him can work this out. I hope so, I sighed. Sorry, Mom. Glenn just came in. I'll talk to you later. Now I regretted involving her. I hadn't expected Kurt to be rude to Janie. Maybe I didn't know him as well as I thought I did.
During lunch on Wednesday with Eric, as soon as we sat down, he asked, "What's been going on with you lately, Kurt?" "What do you mean?" I responded. "You haven't seemed like yourself for the past couple of weeks, and then you called in on Monday. That's not like you at all. You hardly ever miss work unless you're on vacation." I didn't realize it was that noticeable, I admitted. To most people, maybe not. But to me, it stood out, Eric said. There was a moment of silence before I confessed. "I'm going through a divorce." "Really? After all these years?" Eric exclaimed. "Yeah, after 26 years. Looks like we won't make it to 27, I replied. "What happened?" Eric inquired. "It's been brewing for a while, but the final straw was finding out she's having an affair," I explained. The restaurant seemed to quiet down as I revealed this. Eric responded sympathetically. "Damn, Kurt. I'm sorry to hear that." "Yeah, me too," I sighed. "Do you think you'll reconcile?" Eric asked. "No chance. I'm furious with her for what she's put me through these last 3 years. I can't forgive that," I said firmly. 3 years? She's been having an affair that long? Eric asked, shocked. "No, but she cut me off 3 years ago. No intimacy, no explanation. Just deal with it," she said. "Well, now I am," I replied. "Wow, that's rough," Eric said sympathetically. "Yeah, life's tough, but I'm determined to turn it around," I asserted. "So who's the guy?" Eric asked. "His name's David Perkins. He's a salesman from Heartland Paper in Sioux Falls. He visits mid-states weekly to supply paper. Apparently, they've been having lunches together for the past 3 months," I explained bitterly. What a jerk. I bet he knew she was married, Eric commented. Yeah, I said quietly. Can we talk about something else? I'd like to enjoy lunch without dwelling on this. Of course, Eric agreed. The rest of our lunch proceeded without further discussion of my personal issues.
Another typical day at work, going through the motions, until my boss called me into his office. Sue, what's going on? You seem different today, he remarked. Personal issues. I'd rather not go into it, I replied. Make sure it doesn't affect your work. If you need time off to sort things out, just let me know. No, I'll manage. I apologize. I'll refocus on my job, I assured him. All right, thanks. I need the reliable Sue I've always had, he said. You've got it, I affirmed. The rest of the day, I threw myself into my work. It actually helped distract me, if only temporarily, from my problems. After work, back to an empty house. Thursday arrived, and I was watching the clock. David usually stopped by around 11:30 on Thursdays. What would I say to him? What would he say to me? When he walked in, I flinched. His expression was unreadable as he went in to speak with my boss, a routine discussion about the weekly order and future needs. When he emerged and closed the door behind him, he looked directly at me and whispered, I can't believe you just walked away like that. Shh, not here, I cautioned. Why? You don't want people to know? Have things improved with your husband? He asked bluntly. Let's not discuss this now. Let's meet for lunch and talk, I urged quietly. I didn't want my boss or anyone else to get the wrong idea. I planned to meet him for lunch and explain that what happened was a mistake. We should never have gone down that path. All right, I'll see you at our usual spot. I assume you'll be driving yourself. Yes, I'll be there. At noon, I left and drove to Minerva's. He was already seated in a booth. When I approached, he smiled and gestured for me to sit down. I took a seat and began, David, I want to apologize for last weekend. It was a mistake. I should never have agreed. So you didn't enjoy yourself? It wasn't a good time for you? No, it was nice, I admitted, recalling the attention he had shown me. Then what exactly are you apologizing for? It was a mistake. I'm married, and this could jeopardize my marriage. But you've mentioned that your marriage is more like being roommates. It doesn't seem like it's costing you much. I still need to try and fix things. So, I'm left hanging after spending over $400 on our weekend, and all I get is an apology. I looked at him. It was a side that I hadn't noticed before. What did he think I owed him for the room? Don't look at me like that, he said. You know perfectly well why we went there. I expected that the intimacy with you would last the whole weekend. And I thought you wanted to spend time with me, not just sleep with me, I retorted, getting up and preparing to leave. How stupid you are, he shouted. I hope he divorces you after all. I turned and gave him a piercing look before walking out. Men, all they want is to cheat us, I muttered, heading for the Yukon. I drove back to work, pulled myself together, and spent the rest of the day fully focused on my work.
I received a call from the private investigator who informed me that my wife had lunch with the person in question. But their meeting quickly turned into an argument and she left soon after. In the end, it wouldn't alter the situation, but it did provide some comfort. Perhaps she did have second thoughts about her choice.
That evening, Rachel finally returned my call. Hi, Mom, you called? Yeah, why did you take so long to call me back? Julia called and told me why Dad is divorcing you. How could you? I know you were unhappy, but why didn't you just ask for a divorce? I wasn't unhappy. I don't want a divorce. That's a strange way to try to save your marriage. I don't blame Dad. I hope whatever you did was worth it. Oh God, Rachel, you have to help me fix this. I know he'll listen to you. No, Mom, you're on your own. I was left alone, sitting in an empty house, trying to figure out how to undo my mistake. Each day seemed more hopeless than the last.
Over the weekend, I dedicated my time to searching for an apartment. On Sunday afternoon, I discovered one that met my requirements, a 2-bedroom place, suitable in case any of the kids decide to stay over.
Over the weekend, I spent time at home, reminiscing about all the cherished moments we've shared. All the holidays like Christmas, Easter, birthdays, and Thanksgiving. With Thanksgiving just a few weeks away, I wondered if we'd be together for it and what we'd have to be thankful for. Deciding to ensure all the kids would join us, I called each of them. Rachel and Julia confirmed they'd come when I mentioned inviting Dad and asked if they could encourage him to join us for the sake of family. Getting Glenn on board was a bit more challenging, but with Janie's support in the background, he eventually agreed. Now I was determined to make this meal a special occasion that would evoke all those wonderful memories.
On Tuesday, I received an invitation in the mail from Sue, inviting me to Thanksgiving dinner at her place. I discarded the invitation. The only thing I felt grateful for this year was finally deciding to end the pretense. In the following fortnight, I settled into my new apartment, found some furniture on Craigslist, and created a comfortable new home for myself. Rachel called me half-heartedly at one point, saying her mom had asked her to invite me to Thanksgiving. She accepted my refusal without issue. Glenn also understood when I gave him the same response. Julia, however, pleaded with me to reconsider, and though it was tough to turn her down, I stood firm. Thankfully, Janie didn't call me. She must have understood my message from our last interaction. The Monday before Thanksgiving, as I was leaving work and heading towards my car, I noticed Sue's Yukon parked next to mine. She emerged from her vehicle as I approached, dressed smartly and looking well.
Confrontation, Part 2. "Hello, Kurt," I greeted him, with my warmest smile and most gentle tone. "What do you want, Sue?" he replied sharply. "I still haven't heard back from you about the Thanksgiving dinner. It would be very important to me if you could come, especially for the sake of the children," I insisted, hoping that he would not be able to refuse a personal conversation. "I declined this invitation the same day it arrived," he retorted. "Well, I hope you changed your mind for the sake of the family," I redirected, focusing on the children. "I already told the kids I wasn't coming when you asked them to call me. They know the answer. Why don't you bring your boyfriend instead? I am sure that he will not go to his ex-wife, since she has remarried. Or maybe he's dating one of his partners. Did you know that he's dating 3 other women, 2 of whom are married? He seems to have a penchant for married women." His words stunned me. Did David have relationships with 3 other women, 2 of whom are married? "He's not my boyfriend. I haven't talked to him much since that weekend."
The shock on her face indicated that she was unaware of David's other relationships. The money I spent on a private investigator was worth seeing that expression. "I heard that you had a fight with him when you went out for lunch next week. Judging by your reaction, I think he didn't tell you about his other relationships."
"Oh, Kurt, can't we move on? I promise I won't make that mistake again." "Move on so that I can return to a loveless marriage? No thanks. If you need intimacy, I can provide it." I needed to convince him to drop his objections. "Sue, I can't make love to you because I don't love you anymore. I wouldn't engage in intimacy with you because I'm afraid of catching the disease. You should get checked out if you haven't already, for your own good." Oh no, I thought to myself. I didn't force him to protect himself, and Kurt was right. I knew I couldn't get pregnant. I definitely need to get checked out. I made a mental note that I needed to see a doctor as soon as possible. I'm such an idiot. "You haven't thought about it, have you, Sue? It's over. If you haven't done it yet, find a lawyer and sign the papers," he said. "I'm going to find a lawyer and fight this, Kurt. I know we can go back to what we were once. You'll see."
Well, at least she took a step forward by finding a lawyer. It's about time. I got in the car and drove away, and she was standing there begging me to talk to her.
He drove away, leaving things unresolved. Damn it, I wish we could have talked it through. I got into the Yukon and drove home, crying the entire way. On Tuesday at work, I noticed my boss was tense. He informed me he had a meeting with the president and vice president, and it didn't sound promising. After the meeting, he approached me and announced there would be a mandatory afternoon meeting for all plant employees. At 2 o'clock, we gathered in the lunchroom. The president was present and began by announcing that everyone would have Friday off, extending the Thanksgiving holiday to a 4-day weekend. There was a wave of happiness among the staff. Then came the blow. "However," he continued, You will also have every Friday off indefinitely. We've lost a major account and will be reducing everyone's hours to 32 per week, Monday through Thursday. Benefits will remain unchanged, but we need to tighten our belts until we secure new accounts to make up for the shortfall. The mood shifted instantly from joy to solemnity. When I returned to my desk, my boss approached me, inquiring if I was aware of the situation with 3M. I haven't heard anything. Did we lose the account? I asked. Yes, and that represents a significant portion of our sales. We need to either regain it, secure new accounts, or face workforce reductions. Starting immediately, non-salaried employees are limited to 32 hours, he explained. I was stunned. Kurt must have done this deliberately. Many families would be affected, especially just before Christmas. I couldn't believe he would stoop to this. As the day drew to a close, I overheard two women in the office discussing something. It's all Sue's fault. She just had to get involved with someone else, and now we're all paying for it. My heart sank. How did they find out? Would everyone blame me for this? Walking through the office, I noticed cold stares directed at me. At the end of the day, I hurried to my Yukon, but not before catching snippets of my colleagues calling me derogatory names. I knew I had to confront Kurt. We had to win back the 3M account. I drove to Kurt's workplace, parked near his car, and waited for him to appear.
I left work and noticed Sue's Yukon parked beside my car again. I knew she'd attempt to convince me to join Thanksgiving dinner once more. Not a chance. I wanted nothing to do with her. Approaching my car, Sue emerged from the Yukon, visibly angry. Now what? I thought to myself, you vindictive bastard. I was taken aback. What? Don't act innocent. You're being awful, trying to ruin everyone's Christmas just because you're mad at me. What on earth are you talking about? I'm not ruining anyone's Christmas. The kids can spend time with each of us separately. I'm not talking about our kids. I mean the families of my colleagues. How could you do this? I don't know what you're talking about. Our voices were rising, drawing the attention of people leaving work. So you didn't convince your company to stop doing business with mine out of spite. Now they're cutting everyone's hours to 32 per week. This will ruin a lot of holiday plans, not to mention bills. I was shocked. I hadn't done anything. I don't control our business relationships. Then it hit me. Eric must have been behind this. He hadn't even informed me. I didn't do it, but maybe your actions have consequences you didn't anticipate. Perhaps you should have considered how this would affect others. To hell with you, screamed Sue. No thanks, not anymore, I yelled back. I got into my car and drove off, leaving Sue still furious. Yet I couldn't help but smile a little. I felt some guilt for her colleagues, but perhaps this would make her realize her mistakes.
He left again. I was becoming so furious with him. Maybe it's better that we're getting divorced. How could I solve this situation? Rumors were spreading about me at work. I'm certain tomorrow will be even worse. Driving home, I entered my silent house. I was beginning to grow accustomed to its emptiness. Yet, I wish the kids weren't all away. Their presence would have brought life to the home. Despite their father's absence, I was determined to make Thanksgiving a memorable one. I started baking pies, which diverted my thoughts from my troubles, if only for a while. I found great joy in baking, and cooking in general. It was something I did for my family, and it brought me happiness. I looked forward to having them all home, enjoying a hearty home-cooked meal. Kurt would miss it, though I hoped he would regret not being there.
I drove to the apartment, which felt desolate with its sparse furnishings. Sue's words echoed in my mind. I was certain Eric was behind this. I planned to confront him tomorrow, though my conviction was unwavering. As I sat eating my microwave dinner, thoughts turned to Thanksgiving. Perhaps I'd join others at Pizza Ranch, not homemade, but decent enough. At work Wednesday, I sought out Eric. Hey Eric, my wife swung by after work yesterday. Yeah, I heard about the blowout in the parking lot. What was that about? I believe you know. Did you pull our business from Mid-States Printing? Yeah, got a better deal at Quality Quick Print. 2% savings. Change paper suppliers too, saving 3%. Perkins will feel the pinch without Heartland. I didn't realize you were like this. Note to self, stay on your good side. When someone messes with my friends, I hit back. And what about the people at Mid-States? My wife said they're cutting hours. Quality is hiring, I'm sure. Anything else? I probed. That's enough for now. I never knew Eric wielded such influence. They say the pen is mightier than the sword. Has certainly wreaked havoc on those who wronged me. Almost felt sorry for sending those letters with pictures to David's paramour's husbands. Almost. Let fate decide the fallout.
Shortly after arriving at work, I was called to my boss's office. Oh no, I thought to myself. Sue, I've been informed that you may know why we lost our 3M account. I looked at my hands, the hands that had touched my lover's hands just a month ago. Yes, I knew. It was because of me. I looked up. My husband claims he doesn't know anything, but I think this is retribution for what I did. What did you do? He asked, although I could tell from the look on his face that he already knew. I was unfaithful. Why did you do that? He asked. I'm not that young anymore, and the attention of a handsome man who is 10 years younger than me made me feel young. Well, this desire may have cost us dearly. I'm sorry, very sorry. I've been apologizing a lot lately, more than I have in my entire life. You know that the news has spread. You're going to face a lot of criticism. I know, I've heard some of this before, I admitted. You've been working with me for almost 15 years, so I know your job. I cannot justify your actions, but I will not use punitive measures either. However, I cannot shield you from the possible reaction of others. I will not tolerate offensive language, but this is my limit. Thanks. I'll do everything in my power to fix it, I promised. It would help to earn forgiveness, he said. Thanks. Well, at least as long as I had my job. As I walked back to my desk, I felt the disapproving stares on me. I completed my work exceptionally well, better than I have in years. I needed to prove to my boss that I was indispensable. Around 11 at worst, I received a call. It was David. I can't believe you pulled it off, was what greeted me when I answered the phone. Pulled what off? I asked. You convinced your husband to get back at me. What are you talking about? He works at 3M, right? Yes. What does that have to do with anything? His company just terminated our contract. It's a huge blow to my sales and commissions. They terminated our contract too, so it's affecting all of us. They've slashed our hours to 32 per week. I've also heard rumors that your company might drop us soon. I regret ever meeting you. It's not my fault. You're the one chasing after married women. In fact, I hear I'm not your only conquest. You're dating at least 3 other women, 2 of whom are married. Who told you that? My husband. So, he's the one who sent letters to their husbands. He's taking it out on me because his wife can't stay faithful. You're all worthless. I regret ever getting involved with you. If I don't lose my job, they'll probably give me the worst possible territory.
Tomorrow is Thanksgiving. There's not a lot to feel grateful about. 26 years of marriage have gone sour. I phoned the kids and asked them to visit, but insisted they don't share my new address with their mom. We'll see if they decide to drop by.
I woke up early, partly due to restless sleep, and partly because I needed to get the turkey in the oven and start preparing the other dishes. I didn't expect to see Kurt, but I held on to hope. Maybe he'd feel guilty for not being here when all the kids gathered. By noon, the kids began to arrive. The meal was nearly ready. Is Dad going to make it? Julia asked. I don't think so, honey, but let's keep hoping, I replied. I'm going to call him and invite him again, she said. I knew it was likely futile. After 26 years with him, I understood his stubbornness. From the tone of her conversation, I could tell he wouldn't be joining us. Well, let's sit down and enjoy a nice dinner without him, I suggested. As we sat down and began eating, Julia remarked, I can't believe he's so stubborn. He should at least come to Thanksgiving dinner. Then maybe we could all talk and start to forgive. Dad is hurting. His wife betrayed him. Glenn interjected, looking at me with evident anger. It hasn't been much of a marriage for at least 3 years. They were fighting all the time, then they just stopped talking, Rachel added. Then, turning to me, she said softly, Sorry, Mom, but you know it's true. What's going on, Mom? Glenn asked. Why were you and Dad fighting? Did you cheat on him back then too? Ouch, that stung. My kids witnessed our marriage crumbling, and now think I was unfaithful 3 years ago. No, We were arguing about something else. I was faithful, at least until about a month ago. Why did you do it, Mom? Julia questioned. Well, like you said, your dad and I were drifting apart. We felt more like roommates than a couple. Then this guy started flirting with me and asked me out to lunch. I thought, why not? So, I went. It became a weekly thing for a few months. And then, one thing led to another, and we ended up sleeping together, I explained, avoiding their eyes. Now you want Dad back? Act like nothing happened? Glenn interjected. I know it's not that simple, but I do wish he would forgive me. I've apologized so many times. He should forgive you, Janie chimed in. What? Glenn exclaimed, incredulous. If he loves her, he should forgive her, Janie asserted. How can you say that? Faithfulness is crucial in a good marriage, Glenn argued. Love is crucial too. You can't build a relationship solely on faithfulness, Janie countered. Glenn countered, Indeed, love is fundamental, and if you truly love someone, you wouldn't betray them. But love overcomes all obstacles. If he truly loved her, he would forgive her, she insisted. So, you're saying if I ever cheated on you, I should just forgive myself? Glenn asked pointedly. If you loved me, you would, she replied. Do you plan to cheat on me? Glenn accused. I don't foresee it. I have no intention to, but no one can predict the future, she explained. So, you can't promise me that you'll never cheat on me? Glenn pressed. I can promise I won't, but life is unpredictable. If everything people said were always true, there wouldn't be divorce. Everyone would uphold their wedding vows. For better or worse, in sickness and in health, till death do us part, she reflected. What about forsaking all others? Glenn questioned. That too, she affirmed. You must be ready to love and forgive those you care about. Sensing the tension escalating, I intervened. Let's not discuss this now. Let's be grateful we're all healthy and together. Glenn's expression shifted as he looked at Janie differently. It seemed the romantic ideal was fading. I'm sure they'll resolve this, I murmured hopefully to myself.
The children visited after spending time with Sue, which made me happy. Yet there was an underlying tension. I hoped it would fade with time. We avoided discussing their mother, focusing instead on school and Glenn's new job. My children were now adults with their own lives, no longer my little ones. How time flies. As they left, Glenn hugged me and whispered, Dad, I need to talk to you. I'll call you tomorrow. I smiled, pretending I hadn't heard, wondering what was on his mind. The rest of the day, I watched football, reminiscing about past Thanksgivings. On Friday, his call came. Dad? Hey, son, what's up? Dad, I think I need to break up with Janie. What? I exclaimed. Why? You've always been crazy about her since day one. Dad, yesterday at Mom's, the talk turned to the upcoming divorce. I was disappointed to hear that. I had hoped our issues wouldn't affect our children. Just because your mother and I couldn't make it doesn't mean you should give up on your own relationship. Dad, we talked and Janie kept insisting you should just forgive her. When I asked about Mom's actions, she shrugged it off. She seemed to think if it happened with her, I should automatically forgive her too. When I asked if she might cheat on me, she said, I don't think so, but who knows the future? I was taken aback by her mindset. I know Glenn loves Janie, and I believe Janie loves him. Was she being pragmatic, or was she overly fixated on the idea of love conquers all, almost using it as a justification for anything like saying, if you love me, you'll forgive me? Son, I think you two need to resolve this. Consider premarital counseling or something similar, but it's crucial that both of you agree on this. You need to enter marriage with a clear understanding that there are lines you will never cross, no matter what. I'm not ready to discuss marriage with her until I have that certainty. I understand, I replied. Think seriously about the premarital counseling. Thanks, Dad, I will. I hung up, pondering what my son was going through. The uncertainties, the dilemmas. It was something he had to figure out for himself. Yet I worried about Janie's stance. Would she betray Glenn? Would she expect forgiveness regardless of her actions? What if the roles were reversed? If Glenn were unfaithful, would she continue forgiving him? It's precarious without clearly defined boundaries and mutual commitment.
The following week, I made the decision to reach out to a lawyer. I detailed my circumstances to him, expressing my intention to contest the divorce. He reassured me that we could, at the very least, secure court-ordered marriage counseling. Leaving his office, I felt more optimistic about my life and the possibilities ahead. Whether our marriage endured or not, I knew I would have the opportunity to speak my mind and be listened to.
My lawyer informed me that Sue had obtained legal representation and was seeking marriage counseling in an effort to salvage our marriage. According to my lawyer, the judge is likely to mandate counseling, so it would be prudent to initiate it promptly to expedite the final divorce proceedings.
I convinced Kurt to see a marriage counselor, and we have our first session today. I hope we can address our problems and move forward. It might not all be resolved in one session, but perhaps over time, we can make our relationship work.
I entered the counselor's office with a sense of determination. Perhaps it wouldn't take more than a session or two for the counselor to conclude that our marriage was beyond repair. Given that the counselor is a woman, I assumed she might side with Sue. Regardless, I prepared myself to endure and convey that our relationship was doomed long before her infidelity. That was merely the final straw that the counselor prompted me to explain why I sought a divorce. We've grown apart, and I believe the damage that's been done is irreparable. What do you consider that damage to be? She inquired. 1. Trust. I don't think I'll ever trust her again. 1. Communication. We haven't truly communicated in years. 2. Love. I've lost my love for her. 3. Commitment and fidelity. She invested her time, effort, and emotions in another man, engaging in repeated infidelity. What do you think triggered all of this? She pressed. What was the underlying cause? I would say it started with her rejecting my love and intimacy, essentially cutting me off from any contact. Sue, would you like to respond? First, I still love Kurt. I know the past few years have been the best. Why is that? She inquired. I lost all interest in intimacy. I didn't feel the need for it and had no desire, Sue explained. Was this because of physiological reasons, like menopause? Yes, I simply had no desire whatsoever. Did you discuss this with your doctor? Did she recommend hormone replacement therapy? I didn't want to rely on medication, Sue replied. Why is that? I prefer not to introduce chemicals into my body. So, did you talk to Kurt about this? She asked. Yes, but he couldn't understand my point of view. He just wanted intimacy. Kurt, did she share her concerns with you? Yes, and I assumed there were other ways to deal with it, besides completely giving up intimacy. Like what? She probed. I tried everything to arouse her, but she rejected my attempts. So, I imagine arguments started around that time. Yes, she wasn't willing to make an effort. Sue interjected. How did that affect you? She asked. I felt unloved and unwanted, like she didn't care about my feelings or our relationship. Sue, you mentioned loving Kurt. Why were you unwilling to attend to his desires and needs? I wasn't interested, and attempts to persuade, pester, and even beg me only made me resentful towards him. Why couldn't he understand that those aspects were no longer part of our relationship? Sue, physical intimacy is a normal part of marriage and a way for two people to express their love for each other, she said. It's just intimacy. It's not love. Love is much more than that, Sue responded. Yes, love is much more than that, but intimacy is an integral part of a relationship, she said. Kurt, can you describe your actions and thoughts during all of this? She asked. Well, after months without any intimacy, I decided to stop initiating and wait for her to do so. I hoped that maybe on special occasions she would feel sentimental and initiate intimacy. I thought maybe Thanksgiving, seeing our family together, might spark her desire. But it didn't happen. Then Christmas came. I hoped for a gift from her. Again, nothing. Finally, New Year's. A fresh start, but still nothing. Valentine's Day, supposedly the most romantic day of the year. Went out for a nice dinner, just the two of us. But once again, nothing happened. Then came my birthday. Nothing. Her birthday passed without event as well. Finally, on our anniversary, we went out again, dinner and dancing, yet still nothing happened. From that moment on, I just shut down. Our conversations became devoid of emotion, strictly practical. Discussions about household chores, doctor's appointments, or plans with friends on weekends. We morphed into something more akin to roommates. "Sue, what are your thoughts on this?" she inquired.
I was at a loss for words. Kurt's words had embarrassed me deeply. He portrayed me as cold and uncaring. I couldn't believe that he viewed every interaction as a potential opportunity for intimacy. Was that all he ever thought about? I didn't realize that. I had assumed he had accepted it. It wasn't a big deal to me, so why should it matter to him? Slowly, I began to understand his perspective. To him, rejecting him physically felt like rejecting his love altogether. But that wasn't how I saw it. "I still love you," I insisted, meeting his gaze. "Nonsense, Sue," Kurt retorted. "You haven't shown me love in years. You gave another man what you wouldn't give me. How does that prove you still care about me? Maybe you don't hate me, but you just don't care anymore. So now it's mutual. I don't care what you do. I'm going to find someone who makes me happy and who I can make happy. Someone who shows me their happiness every day, and with whom I can share physical intimacy even when we're not in the mood, out of selflessness, so we both get what we need. That's the kind of woman I'm looking for after this divorce. I want to move on with my life and find that woman." And with that, Kurt stood up and left the room. The counselor and I talked for a while longer, but my thoughts were elsewhere. It was sinking in that Kurt didn't want me anymore. He wanted to find happiness elsewhere, because he wasn't happy with me anymore. I hurt him deeply. Actually, I refused to have intimate relations with him, but I still engaged in intimacy with another man. In the animal kingdom, the young male has replaced the old male. They didn't compete for me, he was just replaced. I returned home and sat in an empty house alone with my thoughts. I didn't feel like cooking, so I ordered a Domino's. As I waited, I replayed the events of the last few years in my head. I could see it clearly now. Kurt tried to show me his love, but I rejected him. The doorbell rang, and I answered it. The delivery driver was standing on the doorstep, an elderly man who seemed vaguely familiar to me. "Sue Randolph?" he asked. "Yes." "I thought it was you. Thanks a lot." "What?" I said. "Because you had to mess around. We all found ourselves in a difficult position, and now I have to work at this lousy job to make ends meet." "I hope you like the pizza," he said, with a strange expression on his face. Closing the door, I stared at the pizza box in my hands. Did he do something to her? I wasn't sure, but I threw it in the trash anyway. In the weeks following the reduction in work hours, I found myself subjected to numerous hostile glances and whispered remarks from my colleagues. The atmosphere became increasingly uncomfortable, but I acknowledged it as my own doing and felt I deserved it.
Well, the meeting didn't go as planned. At least I had the chance to express my thoughts. It looks like it'll lead to more counseling sessions. Oh well, at least I found some satisfaction. I drove back to the apartment feeling alone. I knew I'd be on my own until the divorce was finalized. After that, I promised myself I'd do exactly as I said. Find someone who would make me happy and whom I could make happy in return. Sitting there feeling sorry for myself, the phone rang. I assumed it was Sue calling to vent about the counseling session. Glancing at the screen, I saw it was Glenn, and I smiled at the unexpected call. "Hey Glenn, how are you?" "Hey Dad," he replied flatly. "What's wrong?" I asked. "It's over, Dad. Janie and I broke up." "No, that can't be. You loved her so much. We've been arguing since Thanksgiving. She thinks I'm unreasonable for asking her to promise not to do something she doesn't intend to avoid. I can't enter a marriage with that uncertainty." "Damn it, Sue," I thought. "You not only ended our marriage, but potentially Glenn's too." "I'm sorry, son. I know you care deeply for her. It'll take time, but you'll find someone who's committed to you mind, body, and soul." "Thanks, Dad. I hope you find that someone too."
I was sitting watching TV when I received a phone call. Initially, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me when I saw it was Julia calling. "Hey Julia, thanks for calling. How are you?" "Okay, Mom. How about you?" I've had better days, I replied solemnly. Well, I hate to add to that. I don't want to make your day any worse. What is it, Julia? Go ahead and tell me. Glenn broke up with Janie. What? Why? She called me a little while ago and told me he's fixated on the cheating issue. He thinks she's going to cheat on him. Oh no, I thought to myself. What have I done? She even mentioned he wanted her to promise, and they were considering signing a prenup that would leave everything except the clothes on the cheater's back to the other. Oh God, I murmured. Then I thought, he's his father's son. If Kurt and I were starting out today, he'd do the same. But back then, it was almost unheard of. I guess I should be thankful for that. Well, they had a big argument, and he ended it with her. She called me crying, wondering why he's so stubborn. I didn't know what to say. Maybe he'll calm down, and they can work things out, I said hopefully, though deep down I knew my son. He wouldn't change his mind on this. I give up, I sighed to myself. The next day, I called my lawyer. I instructed him to propose a 50-50 split instead of the 70-30 Glenn was asking for, and also to cite irreconcilable differences. If Kurt agreed, I would sign the papers right away. I knew dragging out a fight would only prolong the inevitable. I hoped he would see this as a fair compromise.
My lawyer informed me that Sue's lawyer had made an offer. They proposed that if we agreed to change the divorce terms to a 50-50th split and cite irreconcilable differences, Sue would agree to end the counseling sessions and sign the paperwork. I immediately rejected the offer, stating to my lawyer, "There's no way I'll agree to that. Changing the reason doesn't erase her adultery. Please remind her lawyer that we have a photo and testimony from a court representative confirming that she was at a bed and breakfast with another man in bed. I will consider the 50-50th split only if she acknowledges this." My lawyer agreed to discuss this with Sue's lawyer to explore potential resolutions.
Kurt declined my offer. His lawyer reminded mine of the witness who saw David in bed. How could I forget that? However, Kurt did agree to the 50-50 split. I instructed my lawyer to accept it. I had already nearly decided that I wouldn't stick around this town once everything was settled. St. Paul was pleasant when we lived there. Perhaps I'll return there, or maybe I'll move somewhere warmer. Either way, I wouldn't have to endure the townspeople shunning me anymore. Reflecting on the past year, I thought about how much things had changed. The next day at work, a new salesman from Heartland Paper arrived to try to win back our business. I asked him about David. "He's in the hospital for at least another day or two," he replied. "Why?" I inquired, trying not to sound overly concerned. "He was badly beaten, looked like he took a serious hit, maybe with a baseball bat. They've reassigned me here temporarily until he's fit enough to return, and then he's being moved to central South Dakota." "Any idea who did it?" "No," he said. "He mentioned 2 guys jumped him from behind. Didn't get a good look at them." I couldn't help but wonder if Kurt had a hand in this. Or perhaps it was one of the other husbands, now that Kurt had let them know. I thought about calling David to check on him, but that might be misinterpreted. I was done with him.
She agreed to the proposal. Now all that remained was for us to await our turn in front of the judge. Given our prior agreement on all matters, the process should be swift. Reflecting on our years together, I still feel resentment toward her actions and their impact on our family. I ponder whether we'll ever reach a point where we can have an amicable conversation again.
The house felt so devoid of life that I eagerly anticipated selling it and dividing the proceeds. Its emptiness forced me into deep contemplation. I attempted to distract myself with mindless television shows, yet my thoughts persistently wandered. When I agreed to lunch with David, I reassured myself, what harm could it do? Now I understand. Somewhere in America, a middle-aged married woman is presently accepting an invitation to lunch from a man who isn't her husband. She ponders, what could be the harm in that? If only she understood.